There's nothing else like it. It's the only heritage home in the central business district of Auckland City that you can sleep in. There are other houses that are older, but nobody lives in them. They're not homes. This house has been in residential use its entire life. It was built in 1901 for a Scotsman and his family, but it wasn't the first house on the site. There was a wooden house here built by Dr. Kenderdine, and in the 1860s, after he passed away, it became a boarding house, and it burnt down in 1900. A year later, John Russell Gray bought the site and built the house. Down in the basement underneath the house, there's a mixture of clay and broken glass and charcoal from Dr. Kenderdine's house. Then the Greys lived here for a little while. Then various other families lived here. The last family to live here was the Zymans, a prominent Jewish family, and they lived here for about 10 years. In 1915, the very first apartment building in Auckland was built right next door, so close you can touch it through the bathroom window. And those developers, Potter and Stanton, a couple of years later, bought this house and turned it into apartments. They made them self-contained by putting in little kitchens. We've reused one of the kitchens as a sort of a guest kitchen so they can have teas and hot drinks and cold drinks. We turned one of the kitchens back into a bedroom, and we used one of them as an ensuite bathroom in the top room. It was like that as flats for 80 years. Thousands of people would have lived here. And the most famous one is Jean Batten's father. Fred Batten was a dentist in early Auckland, and he had the front suite as his flat. He was here in the 30s and moved out in the 80s. He was there at Mangere, the airfield, when Jean flew in on her epic flight. The first person to fly from London to Auckland, solo. And as our guests come through the Jean Batten International Terminal there at Mangere International Airport, is the Percival Gull, the little single-engine plane made of wood and canvas that she flew all the way from London to her homeland, to Auckland, hopped across the world and then launched out across the Tasman Sea. She must have been a very determined woman. Of course, New Zealand was really boring, so she flew all the way back again. So she's done the double. London, Auckland, Auckland, London. But she came and visited her dad every time she came back to New Zealand. So she's been here. We treasure that connection to a very important person in New Zealand's history. Was in flats for 80 years, and then I bought it at auction to make sure it didn't get smashed down. So many of these old houses, they have a big back lawn and they build apartment buildings on them, and they toast the house, and I was determined that wasn't going to happen to this one. So we fixed it up. Took about 10 years to clean all the wood, clean the kauri and upgrade the power and water and make everything nice, give it some love again. And then we opened it up as a bed and breakfast house, and we share it with people who come from around New Zealand and all around the world to come and be here. It's got a really good vibe to it. What I really like about it is when you get here, it's kind of a haven. You can really feel people who come off a plane flight and they're all mixed up. You just shut the front door, and I like to say to them, this is what the world was like before it went crazy. And they just relax. Of course, the dog meets them at the front door, so they know it's not a hotel. This is the unhotel. This is our home, and we love to share it with people. We meet such interesting people. The boring people stay in the hotels. The interesting people come here, and we all sit at the breakfast table together, and they share travellers' tales, and they ask questions about New Zealand. I really feel privileged that I was born in this country. This is an amazing country with a freshness, sort of an entrepreneurial spirit. And when I was doing the restoration, there were no plans, but you'd pull things carefully apart and you'd see how things used to be. The beautiful thing about the conversion from the family home to the flats is the workers didn't want to spend any more money or any more time than was absolutely necessary. And they also, I think, respected the craftsmanship and the work that had gone into building the house. So when they built, the doorways and the arches and the halls, they didn't cut into the dado. They cut around it, fretworked it so that it didn't damage any of the work that had gone before. It's a very sort of straight, unpretentious house. So it's got really strong lines, and a lot of the heritage features had survived. An interesting story that a retired doctor told me. He and his family lived in the front room. It was a bed sitting room, and Father Batten, Fred Batten, who lived upstairs, was a dentist. Now Derek's mother got very sick. She got blood poisoning, and she nearly died. Fred suggested that they go and get a second opinion on this illness that his mother had. And a surgeon up the road, near Albert Park, diagnosed it as blood poisoning. And this is in the days before antibiotics. And so they did some surgical drainage. And she pulled through. She survived. Now, Derek's father was a pharmacist. But Derek, I'm sure, seeing how the skills of a medical professional saved his mother's life, probably inspired him to go into medicine. He became a very successful general practitioner in Herne Bay. Lovely old guy. When we had we had the house blessed, and I was handing out invitations at church, and Derek came along, and I said to Derek, we've bought a new house, and we'd like you to come along and be part of the blessing. And he says, "Oh, where is it?" And I said, "Oh, it's in Parliament Street." And he says, "Oh, I used to live in Parliament Street." And I said, "Oh, really? In one of those apartments?" He says, No, we lived in this big old house in the big front room." I says, "Derek, we bought your house." And he says, "Oh, fantastic, I'd like to come along and have a look at it and see what you've done to it." I says, "Well, we only moved in yesterday, so we haven't done much, but come along." And he sat in the front room there and reminisced about he was 6 at the time. He'd met Jean Batten here in the front foyer, and he said she was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. Well, he was only 6, but she did fly in with her silk scarves and white leather flying suit, so she was very glamorous, the Garbo of the skies. But he treasured that memory and shared it with us at that first housewarming party. It was brilliant. The people you meet have come to parties here, have known people here, lived here. They want to come in and see what it's like. It's fantastic, and we take that as, I regard myself as the guardian of the house and all of the history and the love and joy that people have had here, and I love to share it with people.